Have you ever seen a good fight scene? Like a really good fight scene that makes you step back and think, wow, that was a really good fight scene. If you're watching Tokusatsu, yeah, definitely. There are great fight scenes all the time. But in a medium where action is one of the main draws and present in almost every single episode or movie, things sometimes turn very by the books and can feel phoned in at times. But almost every single series is going to have at least a handful of engaging fights. A good fight should make someone who might not even be a particularly big action fan stand back and notice that what they're watching is really well made. You notice the hard work, the creativity, and the dedication to the craft that's going on in front of the screen. But what about giant fight scenes? That's where things get a little trickier. You don't just line up miniature buildings and find yourself ready to go. There's a lot of work that goes into making a city look just right. One of the elements employed in Godzilla and Ultraman is the use of a technique called uchibiki. This essentially means you have the interior of a building made at one scale, while the buildings around it are created at a different scale. When you view the surrounding buildings from the interior of the smaller one, you're giving the illusion of depth. The idea of capturing something and then scaling it down finds its roots in bonsai, which Godzilla director Teruyoshi Nakano believes might have played a part in the idea of making tokusatsu cityscape miniatures. By capturing the image of the outside world from within an interior shot, the director has complete control over the image that's being presented. Altering even just the slightest bit can have a radical impact on what the viewer is seeing. So we have the set, what's next? The use of weight and impact is also vital to giving the sense of scale that makes a giant fight scene feel just right. There are a couple of ways to accomplish this, and they all tend to revolve around giving your subject the proper weight. Two examples are your typical Ultraman fight and the fight scene in the first episode of Kishiryu Sentai Ryusoulger. Both play with the idea of giving something weight in a different manner. Ultraman gives us slow motion, showing us towering figures that can't move at the speed we might expect from a normal-sized human. Ryusoulger played with weight by using sound and impact to achieve a very different result. You've got the fast motion of a typical fight scene, slightly weighed down by the heavy suit, plus the use of sound and impact to replicate what a giant figure landing or taking a massive step might sound and feel like. Now, Ultraman is for the most part the leader in creating giant-sized fights within Tokusatsu. It's the bread and butter of the franchise. One of the most impressive giant scenes to hit screens recently was from the third episode of this year's Ultraman series, Ultraman Taiga. This episode sees the introduction of the show's second hero character, Ultraman Titus. This scene gives us an awesome pedestal and tracking shot that makes great use of CGI for the buildings around Titus. The slow motion gives you a scale for the buildings while also allowing us to get in closer to him than normally possible if they were all just physical miniatures. This is how you make use of CGI to enhance a scene, rather than completely having it overtake the scene. I think the most important element to any good fight scene on this scale is always going to be those camera angles. Placing it lower gives the impression of the viewer looking up at a giant creature. Going even deeper than that, it makes you feel like you have to look at the giants from a distance to get the full picture. It makes them feel giant. This shot of Taiga running is a great example of why it's important to pay attention to detail with these cities. You need to give the impression that the heroes are fighting for something real. Yeah, lights in the night sky look cool, but it also needs to feel as if this is a living city, as if there are people there. And by seeing the destruction from within an apartment, you're able to get a decent approximation of a giant creature crashing down. It makes it feel that much more real. Going back to Ultraman Taiga, episode 6 gives us another beautiful transition shot. We're treated to a CGI and practical combo that allows for the camera to track an alien from the ground as he flips over the viewer. This is honestly one of my favorite pieces of giant scale filming that I've ever seen. This episode was directed by Kiyotaka Taguchi, whose work you should check out if you're at all interested in giant scenes. So we have detail, now what about weight? A truly great fight scene at this scale is a combination of all of these things. When a typical Sentai gives us a fight scene, we oftentimes get what I like to call the fighting game setup. This means we're seeing two characters square off against each other from a side view profile. Looking at this fight from Shinkenger, it feels very static. The weight given to the giants feels surface steep, and the camera angles are really poor. Nothing about this really feels like we're watching giants go at it. Now episode 6 of Taiga, that lets us see a living, breathing city. There are cars, plants, lights, stairs, everything you need to make a city feel alive. There's an amazing attention to detail going on. And honestly, that's something that Sentai has a hard time doing. A great giant scene should be a representation of things that matter. It's not just a good fight scene, it's something that creates a world within a world. Yeah, we're back. This took a little longer than I wanted it to, but thankfully it wasn't super long like the last break I had. Yeah, so I've been wanting to talk about giant fights in Tokusatsu for a while, mostly because there have been a lot of times I will watch a fight and think, wow, that's pretty neat. And then I think, why is it neat? Like, I have trouble putting my finger on the technicalities of what makes it cool. So I did a bit of research and I watched a lot of stuff, and here we are. Yeah, I don't really have a whole lot else to say. go watch Ultraman Taiga. It's a really cool show. It's like kind of like Den-O if that was an Ultraman, but you know, not as comedy heavy. It's got Ultraman Titus, who's the big old swole guy you saw. Everyone seems to be loving him at the moment. Yeah, so I guess question for the comments, what is your favorite fight scene? And yeah, I still don't know how to end these things, so